Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for being here with us and spending the evening with Ananya and with William Dalrymple as they talk about her book, Place, Intimate Encounters with Cities. But before we begin, I would like to say a very warm and heartfelt thank you to the Humayun's Tomb Museum, to Ratish, Nanda, to Nidhi Purohit and his entire team, who have been the most extraordinary people to work with for this evening and for this event. Unfailingly courteous, gracious, generous, spontaneous, a real pleasure. So thank you, Ratish. You're not here, but thank you anyway, and Nidhi, of course. Ananya is, of course, a highly regarded, award-winning writer, scholar, and her book, Righteous Republic, which was published, about 12 years ago, has become like a kind of, how should I put it, a benchmark for a particular kind of writing on a particular kind of subject, which I will not dwell on. And so, as a scholar, her reputation is secure. But it is as an essayist that we hear and read her in a completely different voice. And that voice has a particular quality which is layered and intimate and searching. And these are qualities you don't normally expect from an academic writer, but here we are, and here they are, and they are exquisitely present in this book, which is the subject of this evening's conversation. Ananya doesn't approach cities in the way that everyone else has or does. Her cities are repositories of history, of memory, and of meaning, all of which she uncovers as she follows their emotional and intellectual contours and reveals them with amazing insight. I will not dare to introduce William Dalrymple because he is such a well-known, such a familiar, such a beloved figure in Delhi. But I will say this, that this evening is special with him here. And that is because he too is a chronicler of cities. He too is a journeyer. He too has been on extraordinary journeys. My particular favorite is in Xanadu, which is his first book.
Downhill all the way for 40 years.
All the way from Jerusalem to China. And of course, everyone in Delhi knows City of Jinns. So to have two people, two writers who write about cities and who write about cities in very unique voices is exceptional. So two exceptional writers who write with great depth and great originality. I am delighted that they're both here. I'm delighted that they're going to be speaking to us. And I'm so happy that you're all here to be able to share this with us. So thank you. Thank you, William. And thank you very much for this evening. Over to you. Oh, sorry. Cell phones on silent, please. And we'll try and have some Q&A, but William has to leave a bit early. So we will see if there's time.
It's a measure of Ananya's restless brilliance that as we gather to discuss Place, she pops out another book, which was published only yesterday. I think a big round of applause, first of all, for Signature on the Wind, her translations of her father's poetry. Ananya is inheritor of a literary and intellectual tradition, and these qualities, I think, have made her an oddly unclassifiable scholar. Originally a Sanskritist, since then has been a historian, a scholar of political thought, and yet none of these are the things that are foregrounded in this extraordinary book, which shows quite other qualities and quite other concerns. It's a very odd and very unusual and original mixture of travel, autobiography. There's an emotional map locked in it that's quite different from the physical map of different places in the world. There's a huge amount of family history and also personal loss and rediscovery in it. It's oddly and unusually honest and feels very raw at times. I read it on the move when I was traveling around Australia and when it was still in manuscript and sent this to Ananya. Erudite and hyperliterate, endlessly curious and constantly questioning. Ananya Vajpeyi has one of modern India's most learned, unpredictable and interesting minds. Place is a wonderful introduction to her work and the perfect opportunity to savor her warmth, her disarming honesty, and her restless, searching brilliance. Ananya, tell us the origins of this book. Obviously, it contains pieces over many years, but you get the feeling that there's a coherence here that hasn't come from just a random scattering of travel pieces put together. Half were written specifically for this book. Take me through the creative origins of this volume.
Well, I've told the story a few times now, but it is on. It is on, yeah? I said I've told the story a few times, but you haven't heard it, really.
And I'm sure many in the audience will not. So,
yeah, this book was Ritu Menon's idea. She approached me a couple of years ago and she said, look, I've been following your writing over time and I think there's a book there and I think it should be called Place. So she, she arrived with this idea and it took me a while to understand that it was not only possible but perhaps inevitable. Now, I myself hadn't understood that I had or realized or remembered that I had written so much about different places. I had some anxiety about how it would all get pulled together because, as you know, the essays are very varied in style.
That's the strength in many ways, though. It is.
Yeah, so they weren't, all written with one idea in mind or at one point in time or with, a kind of genre consistency. They were all different lengths. They had different tones. They had come out in different parts of the world for magazines, for more literary journals. Some were unpublished, almost short fiction sort of attempts that were just sitting in my drawer since the time I was a student. So Ritu actually talked me through this process of building this book. And eventually, there were many other pieces that we could have used, but we elected not to, or she didn't find them to be to belong in this particular volume. On account of some quality of voice that she had identified. And I think eventually, even though I can't say what it is, I think I understood what she was after. Because then I sat down just last summer and I wrote half the essays that are here.
Which were the essays written specifically for the book? Which were the ones that...
The Bangalore essay, the Banaras essay, I want to say the New York essay, the Amsterdam essay, actually, although, these are set in a time that's very far back, but the Bombay essay, the Shantiniketan essay.
Was it a different thing to
And the
write
Dresden
those
essay.
specifically for the book as opposed to for the publishers' magazines or?
Yeah, because I had a kind of, I had a kind of warrant or a mandate, but I also had, the freedom to then go with that thread that Ritu had sort of extracted from this mass and mess of materials. And actually, it forced me to sit down and look at, all the writing I've ever done as an adult over 30 years or something like this. And, I went and read old diaries, I looked at old photographs, I found stuff of my parents.
Your parents are very present in the book.
Yeah, so it involved a kind of strange research into, my own oeuvre in a sense, but it was forgotten, and I'd completely forgotten about many things, which I then revisited, and then I understood how to narrate them and how to plot them, which I probably wouldn't have known how to do at the time that I was living in those places or going through those experiences.
You open the first essay with a quote from Sebald.
Yeah.
Is he a particular influence? Because I feel that of all the different, there's more Sebald than Suketu. There's more Sebald than Jeff Dyer, who's also
Absolutely, yeah.
You were on in Calcutta with Jeff, who's also written about Benares and
Yes.
also written about Venice,
Yeah.
which are not two cities that automatically are often paired.
Yeah, actually it was, I long ago met Jeff when you invited him to Jaipur and not seen him since. And then we were on stage together just about 2 weeks ago. And it was great fun talking to him from this new position of not just being a reader of his work or an admirer of his work, but, we actually had things to talk about. Sorry, tell me again what you asked about Sebald.
Yes, your influences was what I was getting at.
Sebald is very important to me.
Yeah.
If
Rings of Saturn, or particularly, or
I've read every single word of his that has ever been published in English. I keep looking for, new things keep appearing. I've read his life.
He's someone also who you can read at different points in your life and spot completely different things in his writing.
Yes. So I've read, all his major well-known books. I've read the biography. I've read his minor works. I've read his criticism. I've read criticism about him. I've watched films, interviews, I know his voice. I have a whole sort of side project on Sebald. And
his ghost is haunting this.
His ghost is, all sorts of ghosts haunt his Europe, and I think his ghost haunts me whenever I go to Europe, or pretty much anywhere. I've been reading him for the last, since around 2001, I would say.
Have you come across Cees Nootboom's work? He's a similar sort of figure. He died, funny enough, just 2 days ago.
Who is that?
Cees Nootboom, who's a
No.
Dutch writer, very much in the Sebald tradition.
I don't know him.
And a
I
friend
don't
of
know him.
Sebald.
Yeah. I went actually just last summer to Norwich to visit the East Anglia.
To walk in the
campus and to see, but there was absolutely no memorial to him anywhere on campus, and I believe there's some convoluted reason for that. Which
the Rings of
sad.
Saturn is very much East Anglian.
Yeah.
That geography haunts that book.
Yeah.
And what other writers of place do you admire? Who else do you think? Did you read Jan Morris, for example, who's one of the great essayists on cities?
I don't know
Do you
Jan
read her?
Morris. I mean, present company included or excluded. I mean, I don't know. I have an odd an odd list of people that I am fascinated by. I think the more sort of well-known, travel writers, not necessarily on it. I mean, not desperately reading Bruce Chatwin or, but I do, now this is a very odd thing to say, but I do like to read Naipaul.
Not at all, no. He's a great essayist.
He's a great essayist. He's a great stylist. I mean, he may be a very unpleasant individual, but that aside, I like his eye for detail and the way he puts people into the places that he goes to, and even if it's a misanthropic vision, it's still a very rich...
He's a very brilliant essayist, despite everything.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, everyone read and admired Sukhetu's book when it came out, and
to me, it's the great Indian city book.
Yeah. And when I was writing about Venice, I read a lot of writers who've written on Venice, and Istanbul for me is, interchangeable with my being able to read Pamuk, and I've read him for many years, also for about 25 years.
And you were actually living in his flat?
No, below his flat.
Below his flat, in his building?
In his building, we were living there for about a year, but have subsequently, I visited, his home and his island
rescued my son
place
at one point. When you rescued one of my sons when Adam was lost in Istanbul at one particular moment.
I've had a chance to visit his wife's home and her parents and so on and so forth. So I've really, I have moved through Istanbul with him as my guide. Sometimes literally, but also through his books, through the way he looks at the city.
Do you want to start by reading from the Istanbul essay? Because that's one of the finest in the book.
Sure.
It's also a great walking city, which, and for some reason, like Venice, walking provokes writing. It's much easier to write about a city when you can pace it on your foot. Rather than,
which is how I was able to take Adam around, because I knew it so well. One of Willie's sons came to visit one time when I was in Istanbul, and
he was at a particularly emotional moment in his life. He just had a relationship which broke up, and it was a very big moment for him when he came.
And we ran around exploring the city together. I'll read a bit from this essay. It's called Istanbul Interregnum. India I could always return to later. What about Turkey, which surrounded me and yet remained mysterious? From long habit, I turned to my principal window into Turkey, the writing of Orhan Pamuk. I returned to his books that I had read and loved, Istanbul, Memories of a City, Other Colors, Essays and a Story, The Museum of Innocence, My Name is Red. And at the time I was writing this essay, I said, I read his new novel, then new, The Red-Haired Woman. I began walking, and slowly in my daily hikes, sometimes extending for hours and kilometers that might have surprised my trusty iPhone app had it been a person and not an app, I retraced in Borgesian fashion Pamuk's map of Istanbul in its actual dimensions, directions, and distances. Every moment was absorbed in navigating a universe in which I got my bearings from his essays, novels, memoirs, and criticism. I walked at once in the lost city of his childhood and youth, and in the city of my own hiatus from life, and of his mature commentaries as Turkey's foremost writer at the height of his literary fame, creative powers, and critical faculties. Every few days, I would take the boat from the European to the Asian shore and back, tacking between different stations. Karakoy, Kadikoy, Besiktas, Kadikoy, Eminonu. And from the Bosphorus, I could see in a different perspective where I had walked along the waterfront. Karakoy, Galata, Tofane, Jahangir, Kabatash, Besiktas. And then behind those, invisible from the boat, Chukurjuma, Istiklal, Pera, Taksim, Nishantash. I never tired of my walks. I'm convinced I could spend several more years walking those streets, uphill and downhill, inland and along the waterfront, mosques and markets, cafes and cats, Paris and Brooklyn, pastry shops and chai shops, delicatessens and fresh fruit juice stalls, red Turkish flags and yellow taxis, the gliding seagulls and the leaping porpoises, the whole city a wonderland of earthly delights, endlessly diverting, intricate, intimate. My balm, my refuge, my consolation.
His books have always Istanbul walks in them. I always think My Name is Red. These characters walking up and down hills between cemeteries or following the different tea shops and the different coffee shops. And it's an Istanbul cover, is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's actually a photograph taken by a very dear friend, a Dutch photographer by the name of Wim Clerks, who appears in the book several times. He pops up, in different cities, in Amsterdam, in Venice, in Bombay, in Bangalore. Are
you a fan of Araguler's pictures of Istanbul? Because he very much figures in Pamuk's.
Absolutely. I mean, the neighborhood that I'm most familiar with, where we lived and where I still return, including the street on the cover of this book, is where Araguler lived. And just down the road is this cafe named after him with all his photographs. I have a huge collection of his photographs and books. And he was alive when we first started going there. And he died just a few years ago. So one could actually see him. He would still move around the neighborhood, but he needed a wheelchair and a van and all of this, and his family would sort of take him around.
Those two men have defined Istanbul for so many of us, the photographs of Güler and the prose of Pamuk. And they haunt both these.
And a third person, actually, this filmmaker, Nuri Bilgi Ceylan, who also lived and lives probably still in the neighborhood. His films are just, but those are more about Turkey as a whole, not necessarily about Istanbul. But Araguler, was an absolute, an obsession in a sense, but also, a real presence in the environment.
In your vision of it, and the boats and the streets and the hills. Another walking city, Venice.
Yeah.
Again, in this one, as so often in this book, you're in the footsteps of your father, who's very much a figure that haunts this book. You talk about that for a minute?
Actually, I know Venice best through somebody you introduced me to. Jane D'Amosto, Jane and Francesco D'Amosto, who live there, and I've gone and stayed with them many times and visited them many times. But my father was not in Venice, actually. So the essay about Venice
is following his.
So the essay about Venice is actually about meeting the philosopher Giorgio Agamben, who lives in Venice. And I was in Venice teaching at the university one semester, and I've read a lot of Agamben. I've written about him. Including MG for that monograph I wrote for you, and I really wanted to meet him, and I had great difficulty locating him, even though he lived in that city, because he has no institutional address. He's not associated with a university or he just sort of appears. His books keep appearing in a regular steady stream, but the man himself is very hard to meet. And I I remembered, or my parents reminded me of a story of when my father, as a young man, had gone on a tour of various places in Europe as a poet. And one of the people that he met was Samuel Beckett, who was a big hero of his. This is before I was born. And he was very kind of, heavily sort of moved by, this is a pivotal meeting for my father in his own long story of traveling and meeting interesting people. And he wrote a whole article about it way back then in the Times of India, My Evening with Samuel Beckett. So when I sat down to write, eventually I did meet Agamben, and when I sat down to write about it, I started the essay by describing what that meeting with Samuel Beckett meant for my father, 40 years before I met Agamben in Venice. He went to meet Beckett outside Paris, and so I kind of reconstructed that incident and wove the two into a story.
I think we need a reading.
Okay, sure.
How did you locate Agamben in the end? Was Jane the way in, or who found
No,
him for
actually,
you?
Jane was not the way in, and neither was my other academic friend, Shaul Bassi, who works on Shakespeare. You know him through Stephen Greenblatt, probably.
Yeah.
But he was known to another friend of mine, Noga Arika, whose father, the painter Arika, was a friend of Beckett's, but also somebody that Agamben admired, and Agamben had written an obituary.
Just in case there's anyone here that doesn't know about Agamben, just give us a little word or two about what this notoriously reclusive. Tell us about his work.
Yeah, he's, I guess, one of the great living continental theorists, political theorist. Started out as a classicist. He had been a student of Foucault's and of Heidegger's. He's an editor of some of Walter Benjamin's writings. And he has a particular way of writing political theory, which grows out of his deep engagement with Greek and Latin classics and literature. And this informs his theory about modernity, which actually culminates in the study of the Holocaust. And what always appealed to me about his way of thinking is that he traces, a lot of the pathologies of the modern world around sovereignty, around power, around violence, back to texts which are located in Greek and Roman antiquity. And that's something that I sort of aspired to do with Sanskrit sources, thinking about ethics and morality and violence and virtue and so on.
And the echoes.
And power, yeah, and sort of finding the presence of the past. So in that sense, I always admired him. He was also one of the first people who refused to travel to the United States after 9/11, when they introduced biometrics for travel.
Not the last going to be to refuse to travel.
Right. And I think he's never gone to the States since then, or he would be, probably sitting in one of the American universities. But anyway, I finally got to meet him. He spent a lot of his youth in Paris, and he teaches sometimes in Switzerland, but he doesn't really teach anymore. He's quite old now, I think. So anyway, do you need me to read?
I'd love you to read, please.
So anyway, my friend finally got me an email, and he said, sure, come around, 3 in the afternoon, such and such address. And I was just beside myself with anxiety and excitement, as I was actually earlier today as well. The day I was to meet Agamben, I first went to Fondazione Querini Stampaglia to look at the Giovanni Bellini paintings, most famously the Presentation of Jesus at the Temple, which is from 1469. The tiny museum contains a number of jewel-like works by Venetian masters of the 15th and 16th centuries. The walled garden, designed by the modern architect Carlo Scarpa, is quasi-Japanese in its minimalist style, its precise yet restful arrangement of water, stone, and plants. There were no other visitors, for which I was grateful. As summer approached, Venice was becoming overrun with tourists. I had visited the Peggy Guggenheim collection just a few days earlier, and it had been rushed and crowded to the point of being unpleasant. I lingered for a long time in the Stampaglia Palazzo, looking at so many glowing, beating tableaux of Jesus and Mary, thinking about the relationship between religion and art, and religion and political theory. Later, I would learn that Agamben had played a bit part in the 1964 film, The Gospel According to St. Matthew, directed by his friend Pier Paolo Pasolini. Even later, I learned that Pasolini was murdered in 1975. In Agamben and Ferrando's book, this is a reference to another book, The Unspeakable Girl, which is about the mythical and mysterious figure of Kore or Persephone, a daughter of the Greek god Zeus from Demeter, his sister, I would eventually come across a description of Renaissance painting in which thought and vision coincide. So Agamben and his co-writer, Monica Ferrando, write, the image of thought, like Renaissance allegory, is a mystery wherein that which cannot be discursively presented shines for a moment out of the ruins of language. I stood transfixed before image after image of Christ and his Virgin Mother, luminous with unutterable significance. Suddenly I realized that I had barely 20 minutes left to race from Castello to San Polo, and naturally I didn't know the way, because in Venice it is impossible to know the way. After running in a panic through mazes and warrens of streets with an arrow-like sense of direction that I had never suspected myself of possessing, I arrived, hot and out of breath, but on time. The square was deserted. The Sotto Portego he had directed me to led to an alleyway that admitted little sunlight, even at 3 in the afternoon. 2 brass plates affixed to the wooden door had 4 surnames on them. One was Agamben. The buzzer rang me in, and I went up 2 flights of stairs, wondering if wearing my favorite cherry red buttoned boots bought in New York had been the best plan in the circumstances. It was too late.
Could you just also read the postscript at the end from page 120? Because I think that is a measure of how you interweave your own life and your own family and your own emotional history into place, which is such an interesting feature of this book.
So, this essay on Agamben is called Waiting for Giorgio, which is, of course, a play on Waiting for Godot. And so I start with my father meeting Beckett. And my father lived just long enough to see it come out in the LA Review of Books in print. And a few days later, he died. And so then I wrote a postscript. I mean, he didn't see the physical copy of the journal, but he did see the proofs. So before it went to press, I then wrote a postscript. April 9, 2015. My father, Kailash Vajpeyi, had a massive heart attack on March 31 and died just before daybreak on April 1, 2015. I was away when he was hospitalized. I managed to return to Delhi by late evening of March 31 and to be with him in his last hours. He was on life support and unrecognizable as himself. But when I spoke to him and wept and caressed his hand, his eyes were open, the muscles of his mouth and throat twitched. He had been waiting for me, I felt. Soon after that, his vital signs flattened out. As the sun was setting on April 1, I lit his funeral pyre. Per the priest's directions, I stood at the head of his burning body and smashed a pot of water against the ground. I then drove a long stake into the flames, pulled it back, and threw it clear over and across towards his feet. The visceral violence of these archaic rituals, unchanged since Vedic antiquity, is meant perhaps to break down every shred of attachment one might feel to an embodied being, and to transform the dead person's presence, until so recently so real, entirely into a collage of memories, face, voice, gestures, words. Among the couple of hundred mourners who had gathered at the cremation ground, there was Ashish Nandi, whom I hugged with relief, gratitude, and terror as I spotted him in the congregation. Later I discovered that all the headlines in the Hindi newspapers and news sites mentioned not only my father's death, but also the fact that it was his daughter who had performed the last rites, thereby transgressing a stricture in Hinduism against women performing death rituals. Should I carry on?
A little bit more. It's wonderful, this.
On April 8, I took a cotton bag of his charred and fragmented bones to Allahabad, where the confluence of three holy rivers, the Ganga, the Yamuna, and the mythical Saraswati, creates a sacred gateway whence the dead may finally depart the mortal world. After a 2-hour-long rite to venerate my father's ancestors and ensure his smooth passage into the everlasting life, into a sphere of everlasting life, I was led out in a boat along with my mother and my partner, an aunt, my father's youngest sister and her husband, as well as a cousin, to where the waters of the Yamuna and the Ganga, more muddy and more indigo, flow together. The ancient name of this place is Prayag. The meeting of the rivers is called Sangam, literally merger, confluence, or union. I was asked to face the setting sun and release my father's remains into the water. The pain was like fire, sharp, clear, bright, searing. I had the sensation of being the eye at the junction of two vortices, one funneling down into me from my earliest forefathers, converging in me from an impossibly distant past, the other flaring and spiraling out from me into the vast void that is futurity. Immemorial eons cascaded through me, uncounted generations, and my father's ashes disappeared into the gentle waves lapping around our boat. A word my father had taught me came to mind: pravah, flow. The flow of water, of life, of time, the incessant flux of which we are made, in which we tarry, into which we disappear. I wondered if what I had just done had liberated my father or liberated me from birth and death, from rebirth and suffering, from all the presuppositions and entailments of human love, human action, and human life. In one of his most celebrated poems, my father had written, "Devise a way that the eye not shut, and yet the world vanish. Since drowning is inevitable, never trust the boat, but do trust the river." It's a translation from the Hindi.
Finally, let's come back to Delhi, since we're here. The Indo-Persian Sublime. Tell us about that essay. A travel essay that's not traveling, but bringing you home, in a sense.
Right. Actually, this was an essay. It came out in Vasafiri originally, and it was supposed to be an essay about the Pakistani painter Shazia Sikandar, whom I had been following around and talking to and meeting, and whose work I'd been studying. But by the time it got written, over a few years actually, it had become more than an essay about her painting. It was about the Indo-Persian cultural milieu and the historical past both in art and in in historical time and in art history, in architecture, in urban history, and so on. That gave her the particular style of miniature painting that she is such an exponent of. And somehow meeting this woman, more or less my age, she might be a year or two older than me. I met her in New York, where she lived and where I more or less lived at the time. And she was from Lahore. She had studied painting in Lahore. And I was from Delhi. And, our worlds converged in very peculiar ways, which I tried to explore in this essay. So that's the story of this essay. Yeah.
A reading from here too. Which bit would you love to read?
Make me sing for my supper, don't you?
I'm making you work hard, absolutely.
In the early 90s, I began listening to Qawwali in a serious way. In 1994, I happened upon a recording of one of the great performances of the Pakistani maestro, Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. He must have been addressing an audience outside South Asia because he began the concert with a sentence in English of sorts. "Now we are singing," he announced in his gravelly voice and thick Punjabi accent, "a poetry in the Persian." Without further preamble, he and his troupe began to sing. For many years now, I've tried to correct the sentence in my mind. Poetry in the Persian. Poetry in Persian. A poem in the Persian. A poem in Persian. But it never sounds quite right, except in Nusrat's idiosyncratic grammar. Now we are singing a poetry in the Persian. In Delhi, I'll skip a bit, the city of the Sufi saint Nizamuddin Aulia, the summer heat is excruciating. When the monsoon arrives, one can glimpse paradise. Paradise is really a garden in the rain. Paradise is the crowding of the summer sky with clouds so dark they're almost black. It is trees restless in the wind, laden with water, the deep sound of thunder, intimations that relief will pour out of the sky onto the taut, waiting earth. Amir Khusro, the greatest poet of Indo-Persian culture in medieval times, wrote his verses and composed his tunes in Delhi. It was the heat that gave him words, the rain that gave him music. Delhi was the crucible of Khusro's poetry. In his city, peacocks danced in bejeweled choreography, parrots rose into the air in vortices of green, the Yamuna was swollen in the monsoon. The sky sputtered with unshed rain like laughter held back. Into this rapture came Khusro's poems, spirals of song, heaving, lurching, reckless melodies. Lightning flashed like the inundated city and its gardens, poet and river in flood, a love-making of language, the like of which has not been heard on the subcontinent in the 7 centuries since. I think it's wonderful that we're sitting in this museum.
Probably close to where Khusro must have lived.
Where
exactly.
Close to where both Khusro and Nizamuddin are buried. And I came to live in this neighborhood ultimately for many years, just out of love for
Khusro came to
these
live in
things.
Nizamuddin, didn't he? He came up and
well, he's buried right there.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah. Khusro's oeuvre is among humanity's most exquisite artifacts. Qawwali, the style of Sufi music and singing he is said to have invented, takes the tears out of one's heart, fills up one's eyes to the brim. Qawwali is the great coming of rain, of love, of deliverance. It touches one in places only a lover may reach. It opens doors known only to teachers. It rises from the city of Delhi into the heavens. It is a storm and the city is its eye. Khusro's verses hover, flash, growl, and pour. He sings for the ages. Now it's a little translation of mine, of one of his well-known songs. My heart is so enamored of you, love. I cannot bear to look at your face. I am smitten, stricken. You glance at me and armies advance. Your armies advance. I shall be routed.
Lovely, absolutely lovely. I think that's a wonderful soupçon of all the different flavors of this book. Are there any questions from the audience? You get an idea of the wide variety of intellectual and artistic and literary and musical worlds that have met their sangam, their confluence in this book. Anyone?
We have a mic, right? Somewhere? We have a mic, yeah. I'm sorry, I
Which
can't
is your
see who's
favorite
asking.
essay?
Huh?
I was just asking which is your favorite
My
essay?
favorite essay? Oh Lord. I'm quite proud of one on Bangalore, which is called "The Death of Sanskrit." Although it's something of a betrayal of many people who I love who live there. And I think the Banaras essay, which is the last one in the
Banaras
book.
essay is very strong.
Yeah. Which I wrote most recently. Yeah. Yes, please.
Hello. I would like to ask that once when a writer has written about a city, does that city feel different? Or does it speak differently? Or then it depends on how that city has been written in that article or essay. So, like, what does it do to...
Actually, I feel that I'm not done yet. I mean, for example, I have 2 essays on Delhi in this book. I could probably write a book about Delhi, you know.
There can never be enough Delhi books.
Well, not just Delhi, but I think,
Keep
you know, many
reminding
of the
people why
cities
we
that are
live here.
here. Yeah.
Oh.
Many of the cities I've written about, I need to go back and I'll probably write something completely different, like New York. And there are many cities that I wanted to write about, but I couldn't in the space of one book. But certainly one thing has changed for me, which is that a lot of what were my personal likes and dislikes, my personal observations, my own experiences, my own memories, you know, once you put them out in a book, then they have a life of their own and they belong to other people who read them and who agree or disagree or like or dislike them.
That's the weirdest thing of publishing a book, is that thoughts that have been in your head and you've been living with, and concerns and things which are so personal to you and which you haven't ever expressed. Suddenly, strangers come up and they've read your book and they...
Exactly. I mean, you've experienced this for years with all your books probably, but for me it's quite new to find that something intensely idiosyncratic and personal resonates with somebody also very intensely. I mean, a lot of readers have, you know, got back to me and people have started crying and, you know, people have shared with me what something meant to them and why. It's quite an extraordinary feeling. I mean, you just somehow, you know, you detach in a way from your work, and it becomes sort of shareable and generalized.
Yeah, but at the same time, you know, like that research work that goes into that, and then you have you have known about it so much now. So either way, like if it is something that connects more, that connection that feels, that goes ages back, or like, you know.
I mean, you know, research is like, for me, it's like breathing. I mean, I've been doing research for as long as I can remember. I mean, that's what I do as a scholar. And, you know, I that's how I approach things that interest me, is initially as a researcher. But it's different when you're doing that for a scholarly book or an academic audience, and it's different when you're just following what you love, or what moves you. And then, research can involve all kinds of unexpected sources, which are not just texts in an archive, but as you were saying, I mean, you write so much about artifacts. You're always in a museum. You're always, looking at pieces of art again and again and again from different parts of the world, different civilizations. So it's almost as though, that's a kind of research that really kind of nourishes you as a writer, right? Even though you're not sort of in any formal way trying to set yourself up as an art historian or something like that. So it's like that for me also. I mean, I go quite deep into something that I'm crazy about. Like one of the chapters here on Chennai, involved, 7 or 8 or 10 years of just listening to Carnatic music every day. And, I don't know the languages, but I know a lot about Carnatic music now, And for me, that is inextricable from my understanding of that city,
Thank you.
Rita. Sir, either. Sorry. इधर हिमांशु सबसे सामने कोने में. Sorry, suddenly like a whole lot of hands went up.
Thank you, Avi, for a very gorgeous conversation, by the way, and also very evocative. There's something that has intrigued me a lot. I went to the Banaras chapter while you were speaking about some other chapter because the title Kashi Karvat I thought was really intriguing. So I want to ask you about this. You go to, let's say, a city like that, there are different temporalities for you when you go there. The city has also had different temporalities. And in that lock between the city's time and your time, as in you have changes you would have gone through, having gone there at the time of grief, to gone there with Linda Hess to sort of enjoy. I felt that the city's narrative is sort of gets consigned somewhat to only to loss and not to certain other narratives that the city might have. Like I'm thinking here the seething sexuality of Masan, for instance. I mean, Banaras has been talked about as this timeless kind of a place, but there are also new, very interesting ways of looking at Banaras through these other, some underbelly, some sensuousness. So I just wanted you to comment a little bit about your time and the city's time and what is that relation?
Yeah, I think, there's much more to Banaras than, I give you in this essay. I know there's a whole Banaras that has to do with music that I'm very interested in and that I've also looked at to some extent, but, that is not perhaps evident in this particular essay. I have not thought much about sexuality and gender and things like that in connection with Banaras. But I have increasingly been looking at issues of architecture and urban issues because it's been under so much change in the last,
Assault.
Huh?
Assault.
Yes, assault perhaps is the right word. Since 2014, and that is something I've also written about elsewhere, and in a more urgent sort of a tone. But I think, again, Gautam and I were talking the other day. We went to Banaras Hindu University. He was giving a talk in the physics department, and they said, "Oh, we have a visiting professorship in physics. Why don't you come and spend a year here?" And And I said, oh, come on, you're not going to come to BHU. And he said, well, if we came to BHU, would you come with me for a year? And I said, absolutely, I would. Because then I felt like if I was just sitting there and being driven mad by the place, because it's also an awful place, right? It's not just, a wonderful place. Huh?
And overwhelming.
It's overwhelming, and everyone I know gets sick there all the time, and people are very difficult to deal with in many ways. I myself had some very unpleasant experiences there as well, including within academia, within Sanskrit, and those kind of things. But I would love an opportunity to take a year out of our lives and go and dwell in this very unique place. And God knows what will come of it. I don't know, maybe we'll never come back, I've recently sort of been thinking of a project where I want to write a book, maybe a novel actually, not even a scholarly book, about Tulsidas. And with Tulsidas as the main character, And I've been thinking, like, how on earth can I do this in English? Maybe it would require going and living there or something like that. I'm open to, I'm open to other facets of this diamond. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry. First of all, great conversation, and I really, really am enjoying it. I have not read the book, and I am probably going to go and buy the book and read it. My question is around the people of the city. So obviously a city is more than the physicality of the city, right? It's more than the buildings, it's more than the physical attributes of the city. It's also very important. How do you paint a picture of the people of the city, the people that inhabit? What is it that you do to understand that this is what the people are like, this is what, this is how the culture is like, this is what the people, like how the people live, basically. So how do you draw that inference about the people that inhabit a city?
If you spend enough time and, you put your feet on the ground and you walk, for example, or you meet people, or you go into homes, or you go into contexts that are culturally valued, you learn so much about Turkey by drinking chai in Istanbul, right? Or by, interacting with cats, right? It's not just,
and this sort of book is not by its nature definitive. It's
not ethnographic.
One person's perception at one meeting, and that's in a sense the point, that it is not the last word on Benares or Delhi. It's a moment in time caught. It's a snapshot.
It is. And I'm not trying to do an ethnography or give you any kind of like a sociological kind of analysis or anything like that. But I think there are ways to enter a place and the life of people in that place. The most important is language, I would say. And where one can speak or understand the language, one is immediately at a deeper level than a mere passerby or a tourist, and where you can spend time and where you make friends. People show you what you need to see. Basically, I don't go looking for anything. I'm led by my friends or my, people I encounter. They just take me into these most incredible aspects of life that are not necessarily available, on the surface. And I also sort of, you start to put things together in your head. I don't know, William, you must know this much better than anyone. I mean, there's always sort of connections you're making. You know, the little things that are like question marks, and then
It goes
some months later, suddenly.
conversations, a walk, then you're reading, and then the reading sends you off on a new walk and a new conversation. And
Yeah. There's, I don't know, it's a kind of, it's like putting together a puzzle, you know. And it's a very large puzzle, so it could take you a lot of time. But ultimately, you know, you can make some sense out of the strangeness of many places.
We're nearly out of time. One last question. And maybe we could end with a little quick reading after this
If you like.
from Benares.
So I just wanted to tell you that your language is actually a living experience. It was very beautiful. There was one phrase, I don't know if I got it wrong, I think it was in the Venice one, where you used the phrase, the ruins of language. What did you mean by that?
I was actually quoting.
Yeah, but what does that mean? Your interpretation of it.
Well, they're describing. I don't remember the full context, but it's an essay about Renaissance painting, and you know, the quality of light and the intensity of the colors, and the depiction of these various Christian allegorical scenes, like the Nativity and the Crucifixion and all those different, you know, iconic, in the proper sense of the term iconic, right? Scenes and moments. And I think what they're trying to say is that beyond a point, language fails to lead you to a certain perception of the truth, you know.
Very elegant answer
And
to
you can
a difficult question.
and an image or a work of art can give you that, you know, that immediate and complete comprehension of what is being communicated in a way that maybe the Gospel according to St. Matthew can't. I don't know, you know more about the Christian world than I do, but I think that's something that they were trying to say in that. Yeah.
I'm going to have to disappear. My son is not going to catch his plane because I've got the car. But please, can we have a last reading from Benares?
Okay.
Which I think
sure.
is my favourite essay
Sure.
in this collection. Also the one we talked most about. Forgive me for rushing off. Can we have a big round of applause for Ananya, though, even before the reading?
Oh, you're leaving. I didn't understand that. You're setting me off on some reading and then you're leaving.
Look,
Thank you.
well done.
Thank you, Willie. Say hi to Sam. And good luck.
Nice, I've got the cars.
Okay. Bye. Okay, so this is the last essay in the book. And it's called Kashi Karvat. I want to get to the part where it explains this term, this expression, Kashi Karvat. I was in Banaras again. This time I had with me an urn with my mother's ashes and 2 cousins, both women, slightly younger than me. It was 2 days after my 46th birthday. We stayed in a small hotel, otherwise quite pleasant, except it had a direct view of the burning ghat, Manikarnika. We booked 2 rooms, but in the end slept in one of them, leaving the urn by itself in the other. I didn't sleep much. Bye, Ashishda. Can't hear me. The next morning, still somewhat cold in mid-February, we took a boat and went out on the Ganga. Take us towards Tulsi Ghat, I said to the boatman, but not close to the bank. My father was a poet. My mother used to say to him, "Let's go and live in Banaras. You can write your poetry by the banks of the Ganga like Tulsidas. Your poems will be immortal." My father regarded such proposals with deep skepticism. "What will you do?" he asked her. "I will keep a cow," she said, "and watch the river go by, and listen to you recite your poems, and put bananas in the courtyard of the Hanuman temple for the monkeys. We will grow old together, and we'll die in Kashi and attain moksha." My father was not enthusiastic. "We can do that here," he said, "at home." In the event, they did both die at home, scarcely 3 years apart. There wasn't a cow, but my mother had 2 dogs she loved, and there were monkeys who came to raid her mango tree in the tiny garden in front of the house. I thought the least I could do for my mother was to scatter her ashes in the Ganga at Tulsi Ghat, where she had wanted to live in an idyll of poetry with her beloved, my father. Rose petals, small floating diyas, ashes, into the flowing waters they went. Our first trip to Banaras was when I was a young teenager, and my father was making a film for television about the newly announced Ganga Action Plan inaugurated by Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi. This is in the mid-80s. The dirty river was to be cleaned up at long last with substantial funding from the central government. My father was going for a reconnaissance trip, but my mother wanted him to take us along to see the holy city. It turned into a family holiday. On this trip, I traveled with an urn. After letting go of my mother's mortal remains, I sat in the gently bobbing boat on the quiet, lightly mist-covered waters of early morning, my 2 cousins wrapped up in shawls, saying nothing. I recalled being on a boat with my parents and my father at some point tearing off his clothes and jumping into the river. He had grown up swimming in the Betwa, the river of Kannauj, his homeland. He swam with powerful strokes and I watched, transfixed. My mother, though, was impatient. She too stripped down and leapt in after him. "Take me with you," she shouted. "Don't leave me alone here." They were both in the river, which had a powerful current and is very deep. I took a photograph, which I still have. She's holding on to his arm, her cheek pressed to his shoulder. They're both laughing and waving at me while trying to stay afloat. 30 years later, we took my father's ashes to Prayag, and again my mother got out of the boat in the sandy flats of the Sangam and walked into the water, her sari and her long hair streaming behind her, her whole body taut and twisted with anguish. She looked like a mermaid with seaweed hair. "Take me with you," she shouted. "Don't leave me alone here." Again I watched from the boat, not afraid. I knew their love would hold them aloft, keep their heads above water and carry them through to safety. This time I did not take a photo. Into the same river they went, he first upstream, she later downstream, with me as their witness. I sat in the boat in a reverie, transported from present death to past life, reversing the arrow of time. In Banaras, the Ganga flows westward, as though trying to return to its distant source in the high Himalaya. Only later past the city does it resume its course east and south to the Bay of Bengal. This is called Kashi Karvat, the turning at Kashi. The turning over that happens when we are asleep and change sides without waking up for a brief time. When death comes, one turns from the future towards the past, like a sleeping person in the middle of the night, changing our perspective even though our eyes are closed. Perhaps we turn away from our nightmares and look to pleasant dreams, or perhaps we just need to rest. Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ananya. I'm sorry that William had to leave, and so we couldn't thank him publicly, but I think we're all very appreciative of him and Ananya and the conversation. And all I can say is that for for me, it has been one of the most satisfying books to work on. Not only because the prose is so beautiful, but because it allows you, if you have been to any of these cities and felt something there, it allows you actually to feel them vicariously, deeply, differently. So thank you, Ananya, and thank you, everyone, for coming.
I don't have the book. I loved it. I will catch up with you sometime.
That's all right. How long are you here? 2 days. Okay. Well, you know, one of the essays I have to write.
Yes, I was thinking.
See, that was my question. There must be other places that you want to have.
Yeah, I have one essay which involves the dark and the moonshine. All of that.
Visiting all the places. Take care. Thank you.
Look here. Yeah, oh, you disappeared. Exactly in time.
I listened to the whole thing.
No, it's a good event. Like it? Yes.
Krishna, yeah. Krishna, right.
If you can sign one more. I'm sorry to make you do so much work. This is for my sister-in-law, Monisha.
How do you spell
Monisha, Monisha.
And Gitanji, like you, also loves to travel and also write. So
I think I have a faint memory of that review. Did it have a sketch of it?
Yes, it did. No, the sketch was the lunch that I did.
Oh,
that was
BS.
Yeah. Anyway, good luck with further writing. I look forward to it.
Time goes like that.
Please send it.